The phone rang at 6:47 a.m. on a Tuesday. I was standing in my kitchenette, waiting for the coffee maker to finish its job, watching the early morning light paint the walls of my small apartment in shades of gray. At 64, I'd learned to wake up early. Sleep didn't come easy anymore, and when it did, it was shallow and restless. The number on the screen was unfamiliar. Miami area code. I almost didn't answer, but something in my gut told me to pick up. "Is this Richard Morrison?" A woman's voice. Professional. Careful. Speaking. "Mr. Morrison, my name is Sarah Chen. I'm an attorney with Whitmore and Associates here in Miami. I'm calling regarding the estate of Catherine Morrison." My hand tightened around the phone. Catherine. I hadn't heard that name spoken aloud in what felt like years, though of course I'd seen it. In business magazines. Online articles. The local news when she'd donated another wing to a hospital or funded another scholarship program. Catherine Morrison. Real estate magnate. Catherine Morrison. Philanthropist. Catherine Morrison, who'd built a $340 million empire from nothing. Never Catherine Morrison. My ex-wife. Never Catherine Morrison. The woman I'd once loved more than anything in the world. "I'm sorry to inform you that Mrs. Morrison passed away 6 days ago. Heart attack. It was very sudden." The coffee maker beeped. I stared at the machine, watched the dark liquid settle in the pot. My throat felt tight. "I see. Mr. Morrison, I know this must be difficult, but I need to inform you that you're named in her will. The reading is scheduled for this Friday at 2 p.m. at our offices downtown. Will you be able to attend?" I looked around my apartment. The second-hand couch I'd bought from a thrift store. The kitchen table that wobbled unless you put a folded napkin under one leg. The single photograph on the wall, not of Catherine, but of my mother, taken 50 years ago in front of a house that no longer existed. Why would I be in her will? We've been divorced for 15 years. There was a pause. I could hear papers rustling on her end. "I'm not at liberty to discuss the specifics over the phone, Mr. Morrison. But yes, you are definitely named. Your presence is requested. Actually, it's somewhat required, given the nature of the bequest. Who else will be there?" Another pause. Longer this time. Your son, Christopher, and Mrs. Morrison's business partners. A few other beneficiaries. Christopher. Of course. I closed my eyes, tried to remember the last time I'd seen him. 3 years ago? 4? He'd stopped by this apartment once, after I'd first moved in. Looked around with barely concealed disgust. Asked me if I needed money. I'd said no. He'd left after 15 minutes and never came back. "Mr. Morrison? I'll be there. Thank you. I'll email you the address and details. Again, I'm very sorry for your loss." She hung up. I poured my coffee, but it tasted like ash. Catherine was dead. I sat down at the wobbling table and tried to process it. Tried to feel something beyond the numbness that had settled into my bones like winter frost. We'd met 40 years ago at a community college in Fort Lauderdale. I was studying architecture. She was taking business classes at night while working 3 jobs during the day. I'd noticed her because she always sat in the front row, always asked questions, always took notes in this intense, focused way that made everyone else seem half asleep. I'd worked up the courage to talk to her after class one night. Asked if she wanted to grab coffee. She'd looked at me for a long moment, then said yes. 3 years later, we were married. I was 24. She was 23. We had nothing. My first job as a junior architect paid $32,000 a year. She was managing a small property management company, making barely more. We rented a 1-bedroom apartment in a neighborhood that wasn't quite dangerous, but wasn't quite safe either. We were happy. God, we were so happy. The memories came in fragments. Catherine at our tiny dining table, papers spread everywhere, building her first business plan. Me staying up late at the drafting table I'd set up in the bedroom, working on my first real project, a small commercial building in Hialeah. Catherine's laugh when I'd mess up cooking dinner. My surprise when she'd brought home champagne the day her property management company landed its first major contract. Christopher was born when I was 31. Catherine took 6 weeks off, then went right back to work. I was the one who handled most of the childcare in those early years. My job had more flexibility. I could work from home sometimes, bring Christopher to the office when needed. Catherine was building something. I understood that, supported it. By the time Christopher was 10, Catherine's company had expanded into real estate development. She wasn't just managing properties anymore, she was building them. High-rise condos, mixed-use developments, commercial complexes. The money started coming in, not slowly, fast, faster than either of us had ever imagined. We moved from our modest house to a mansion in Coral Gables. Christopher went to private school. I made partner at my architecture firm. Catherine became a name in Miami real estate circles. Everything was perfect, until the night it all fell apart. Christopher was 15. Catherine was closing a major deal, a $50 million mixed-use development in downtown Miami. The stress had been building for months. Long hours, late nights, barely seeing each other except in passing. I tried to be supportive, tried to understand. The night of June 14th, 2009. I still remember the exact date. Catherine had a celebration dinner with her business partners. She'd called me around 10 p.m., said she was on her way home. Her voice had been off, slurred. I'd asked if she'd been drinking. She'd laughed it off, said she was fine, just tired. The phone rang again at 11:47 p.m. Not Catherine, a police officer. There'd been an accident. A pedestrian had been hit by a car on Biscayne Boulevard. The car had fled the scene. The pedestrian, a 23-year-old student named Marcus Williams, was in critical condition. Witnesses had gotten a partial plate number. The description matched Catherine's Mercedes. I'd driven to the scene. Police everywhere, flashing lights. Catherine's car parked 2 blocks away, front end damaged. And Catherine, sitting in the back of a police cruiser, mascara running down her face, looking small and terrified in a way I'd never seen before. The detective had pulled me aside, told me what they knew. Catherine had been driving erratically, multiple witnesses. Blood alcohol level would need to be tested, but given her state, it would likely be over the legal limit. Hit and run. If Marcus Williams died, it could be vehicular manslaughter. Catherine's entire career, everything she'd built, Christopher's future, our family, all of it hanging by a thread. I'd looked at my wife through the window of that police car, seen the terror in her eyes. And I'd made a decision. I told the detective I'd been driving. It happened fast after that. Catherine had gone home, supposedly too shocked to give a statement. I'd given mine. Said I'd borrowed Catherine's car. Said I'd had a few drinks at a business dinner. Said I'd thought I'd hit a mailbox or something, panicked, and driven home. Turned myself in after Catherine told me what must have happened. The story had holes, but it held together enough. Catherine's lawyers, the best in Miami, had worked the angles, pushed for a plea deal, hit and run with injury, reckless driving, DUI. I'd lost my architecture license, spent 3 years in prison, another year on probation. Marcus Williams survived, but with permanent injuries. Catherine's company had quietly settled with his family for an undisclosed amount, large enough to take care of him for life. When I got out of prison, Catherine filed for divorce. She'd visited me once during those 3 years. 6 months into my sentence, sat across from me in the visitation room, perfectly composed in a gray suit, and said she was sorry. Said she'd make it right. Said she'd take care of Christopher. Said she'd take care of me when I got out. I'd told her I didn't want her money. Told her to just make sure Christopher was okay. Told her to build the life we'd dreamed about. Told her I'd be fine. She'd cried. The only time I ever saw Catherine Morrison cry after that night. The divorce papers came 2 months later. Fair settlement, her lawyers said. I'd get the house in Coral Gables, a trust fund, enough to live comfortably. I'd signed everything away. Gave her the house, gave her full custody of Christopher, took nothing but my clothes and some photographs. I never told Christopher the truth. He'd been 16 when it happened, 17 when I went to prison, old enough to understand his father was a drunk who'd destroyed someone's life and ruined the family. Catherine had told him a version of events that made sense. I hadn't contradicted it. Better for him to hate me than to know the truth about his mother. When I got out, I'd tried to rebuild. But an ex-convict pushing 60 with a suspended architecture license didn't have many options. I'd worked construction for a while. Then as a night security guard. Now I did part-time consulting work for a small architectural firm, the kind of behind-the-scenes stuff that didn't require a license. It paid enough for this apartment, food, basic expenses. I'd seen Catherine from a distance over the years. At Christopher's college graduation, I'd sat in the back, left before the ceremony ended. Once or twice, downtown, getting into Blacktown cars, surrounded by assistants. She'd aged well. Successful people usually did. Good health insurance, personal trainers, stress management therapy. I'd aged like someone who'd spent 3 years in prison and 15 years after that trying to forget. And now she was dead. The days until Friday passed in a blur. I'd called in sick to work. Spent most of the time in my apartment, trying to figure out why Catherine had put me in her will. Guilt money, probably. A final attempt to assuage her conscience. Maybe she'd left me enough for a better apartment. A newer car to replace the 15-year-old Honda I drove. It didn't matter. I didn't want it. But I was curious. And maybe, deep down, I wanted to see Christopher one more time. Friday afternoon, I put on the only suit I owned. Navy blue, bought from a department store 5 years ago for a funeral. It still fit more or less, though it was looser than it used to be. I'd lost weight over the years. Hadn't had much appetite. The law offices of Whitmore & Associates occupied the 23rd floor of a glass tower in downtown Miami. The kind of building I used to design, back when I was someone who designed buildings. I took the elevator up, watched the numbers climb, felt my stomach tighten with each floor. The reception area was all marble and mahogany. A young woman at the desk directed me to a conference room down the hall. I walked slowly, my reflection following me in the polished floors. An old man in an old suit, gray hair, lined face. Hands that used to draw buildings now trembled slightly when I was nervous. The conference room had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Biscayne Bay, a long table made of dark wood, leather chairs, and sitting in one of those chairs, looking at his phone with the casual confidence of someone who'd never doubted his place in the world, was my son. Christopher looked up when I entered. His expression didn't change. No surprise, no warmth, just a brief acknowledgement like you'd give a stranger in an elevator. Richard, not Dad, not Father. Richard, Christopher. He was 38 now, handsome in the way his mother had been beautiful, sharp features, intelligent eyes, the kind of presence that made people listen when he spoke. He wore a suit that probably cost more than 3 months of my rent. His watch caught the light. Some luxury brand I didn't recognize. I took a seat at the opposite end of the table. Several other people filtered in over the next few minutes. Business types, Catherine's partners probably, her CFO, her head of development. They all greeted Christopher with familiarity, warmth. They glanced at me with curiosity, maybe a hint of recognition, then moved on. At exactly 2 p.m., Sarah Chen entered, the attorney I'd spoken with on the phone. She was younger than I'd expected, maybe 40, with an efficient manner and a thick folder of documents. "Thank you all for coming," she said, sitting at the head of the table. "I know this is a difficult time, but we need to proceed with the reading of Catherine Morrison's last will and testament. Before we begin, I want to note that Mrs. Morrison left specific instructions about the order in which information is to be revealed. I'll ask that everyone hold their questions until the end." Christopher leaned back in his chair, completely relaxed. He knew what was coming, probably had known for years. Only child of a woman worth $340 million. The math was simple. Sarah opened the folder, pulled out several documents, and began to read. The first part was standard. Bequests to various charities, specific amounts to longtime employees, a generous donation to the hospital where Catherine had volunteered. Christopher nodded along, looking vaguely bored. Then Sarah's tone changed slightly. "To my business partners and colleagues who have built Morrison Development with me over these past 30 years, I leave my shares in the company to be divided equally among you, with the stipulation that the company continue its commitment to affordable housing and community development." A murmur went through the room. Christopher's expression flickered just for a second with confusion. Sarah continued. "To my son, Christopher Morrison, I leave the sum of $100, along with this message." She paused, pulled out a separate envelope, and opened it. "Christopher, you have everything you need. You've built a successful career. You have your own wealth, your own life. What I'm giving you instead of money is the truth and the opportunity to choose what kind of man you want to be." The room went completely silent. Christopher's face had gone pale. "What the hell is this?" Sarah held up a hand. "Please, there's more." She pulled out another document. This one looked different. Handwritten pages, sealed in plastic like they were important. Protected, Mrs. Morrison left a letter to be read at this time. She specified that it be read in full, in front of everyone present. Sarah cleared her throat and began to read in Catherine's voice. Or rather, Catherine's words. "To those gathered here, if you're hearing this, then I'm gone, and it's time for certain truths to be told. I've lived the past 15 years with a lie, and that lie has poisoned everything good in my life. On June 14th, 2009, I was driving drunk. I hit a young man named Marcus Williams and kept driving. I was terrified. Terrified of losing everything I'd built. Terrified of destroying my son's future. Terrified of facing the consequences of my actions. My husband, Richard Morrison, took the blame for me. He wasn't driving that night. I was. He wasn't drunk. I was. He chose to sacrifice his career, his freedom, his reputation, and his relationship with his son to protect me, to protect our family, to protect Christopher's future. Richard spent 3 years in prison for a crime he didn't commit. When he was released, I divorced him because I couldn't face what I'd done. I couldn't look at him every day and see the price of my cowardice. I told myself I was doing the right thing, that I was giving him a clean break. The truth is, I was running away from my guilt. I tried to make it right in other ways. I ensured Marcus Williams and his family were taken care of. I built my company with integrity, or as much integrity as I could manage carrying this secret. I donated millions to causes that mattered. But none of it erased what I did. None of it gave Richard back the 15 years I stole from him. Christopher, I lied to you about your father. Every harsh word I let you believe, every judgment you made about him, was based on a lie I told to protect myself. Your father is a better person than I ever was. He sacrificed everything for us, and I repaid him with silence and abandonment. This is my final act of cowardice, and perhaps my first act of courage. I'm telling the truth after I'm dead, where I don't have to face the consequences. I wish I'd been brave enough to do it while I was alive." Sarah set down the letter. Her hands were shaking slightly. I couldn't breathe, couldn't move, just sat there, staring at the table, feeling 15 years of careful numbness crack open like ice breaking in spring. Christopher's voice cut through the silence. "This is bullshit. She was sick. She must have been confused. Mom wouldn't—" "There's more," Sarah said quietly. She pulled out a flash drive. "Mrs. Morrison also recorded a video statement made 2 months before her death. She was of sound mind, witnessed by 3 attorneys. She wanted to make sure there was no question about the truth. She plugged the flash drive into a laptop, turned it toward the table. The screen flickered to life. Catherine's face appeared. She was sitting in what looked like her home office. She'd aged since I'd last seen her up close. Lines around her eyes, gray in her dark hair, but still beautiful. Still Catherine. "Christopher," she said, her voice steady but tight with emotion. "If you're watching this, then you know the truth now. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't expect you to understand. But I need you to know that every decision I made after that night, every time I pushed you harder, expected more from you, demanded excellence, it was because I was trying to make you into the kind of person who would never make the choices I made. I wanted you to have integrity because I didn't. I wanted you to be honest because I wasn't. I failed as a wife. I failed as a mother. But I built something real in this world, and I'm leaving it to the one person who deserves it, your father. The man who gave up everything and asked for nothing in return." The video ended. The room was silent except for the hum of the air conditioning. Sarah cleared her throat and continued reading from the will. "To Richard Morrison, my former husband, I leave the entirety of my remaining estate. All properties, assets, investments, and holdings not otherwise specified in this will. This includes approximately $340 million in liquid assets, real estate holdings, and investment portfolios. I leave this to you, Not because I think money can repay what I took from you, but because you are the only person I trust to do something meaningful with it. You were always the good one, Richard. The one with the clear conscience. The one who saw people as people, not as assets or obstacles. My only condition is this. Use some of this money to continue Marcus Williams's care. Make sure he and his family never want for anything. Beyond that, the money is yours to do with as you see fit. Build something. Help people. Or don't. Burn it all if you want. You've earned the right to decide. Sarah set down the final page and looked at me. Mr. Morrison, you inherit everything. The estate has been in probate for the past week. Pending your acceptance, the transfer of assets will begin immediately. I couldn't speak, couldn't process. $340 million. Everything Catherine had built. Christopher stood up so fast his chair tipped over. This is insane. You can't do this. This will is invalid. She was clearly not in her right mind. I'm contesting this. I'll fight this. Sarah's voice remained calm. You're welcome to contest it, Mr. Morrison. But I should inform you that your mother anticipated that possibility. She had 3 psychiatric evaluations done in the months before her death, all confirming her mental competency. She also has affidavits from multiple witnesses confirming the events of June 14, 2009. Statements from the investigating officers at the time, noting inconsistencies in your father's confession that they were pressured not to pursue. Medical records showing your mother's blood alcohol levels from that night, taken during a private consultation with her doctor immediately after the accident. If you contest this will, all of that becomes public record. Your mother's reputation, your reputation, and the truth about what happened 15 years ago all come out. She made it very clear in her final instructions that she preferred the truth to remain private, to protect you, but that she wouldn't allow her final wishes to be overturned. Christopher stared at her, then at me. His face was white with rage. You did this. You manipulated her, poisoned her against me. I found my voice. It came out rough, like I hadn't used it in years. I haven't spoken to your mother in 15 years. Liar. Christopher. I stood up slowly. My legs felt weak. I didn't know any of this was going to happen. You expect me to believe that? You expect me to believe you spent 3 years in prison out of the goodness of your heart? You were playing the long game, waiting for this. Something in me snapped. 15 years of silence. 15 years of watching my son hate me. 15 years of carrying a secret that had hollowed me out from the inside. I expect you to believe that I loved your mother enough to give up everything so you could have a future. I expect you to believe that I loved you enough to let you hate me, rather than know the truth about her. I expect you to believe that I've spent 15 years living in a 500 square foot apartment, working jobs that barely pay rent, while you built your career and your life and never once looked back. Not for money, not for recognition, but because you're my son, and that's what fathers do. My voice had risen. Everyone in the room was staring. I don't want her money. I never wanted anything from her except for her to be okay. For you to be okay. That's all I've ever wanted. Christopher's face twisted. For a second I saw something break through the anger, confusion, maybe even pain. But then it was gone, replaced by cold fury. I don't believe you. I don't believe any of this. He grabbed his briefcase and walked out. The door slammed behind him. The other people in the room quietly excused themselves, filing out with murmured condolences and uncomfortable glances. Within minutes it was just me and Sarah Chen, sitting in that conference room overlooking the bay. I'm sorry, she said after a long silence. This must be overwhelming. I sat down heavily. My hands were shaking. I can't take this money. Mr. Morrison, legally, I can't. It's not mine. It's hers. It's Christopher's. I don't deserve this. Sarah gathered her papers slowly. Mrs. Morrison was very clear about what she wanted. She spent months preparing this. She knew you'd react this way, actually. She left you another letter, private, just for you. She pulled out a small envelope from her bag and handed it to me. My name written in Catherine's handwriting. Take some time, Sarah said. Think about it. This is a lot to process. But Mr. Morrison? Your ex-wife spent 15 years living with guilt. Don't spend the rest of your life doing the same thing. She wanted you to have this. She wanted you to have the life you should have had. She left. I sat alone in that conference room, holding the envelope. Outside, the sun was setting over Biscayne Bay, painting the water in shades of orange and gold. I opened the envelope with trembling fingers. The letter inside was short. Richard, I know you don't want this money. I know you'll try to give it away or refuse it or do something noble and self-sacrificing because that's who you are. But please, for once, be selfish. Take it. Use it. Live the life you should have lived. I stole 15 years from you. I can't give them back, but I can give you this chance. Design buildings again. Travel. Do all the things we talked about when we were young and stupid and thought we had forever. Tell Christopher the truth when he's ready to hear it. He'll come around eventually. He's more like you than he wants to admit. I loved you. I never stopped. I was just too much of a coward to face you after what I'd done. That's my failure, not yours. Live, Richard, please. For both of us. Forever sorry. Catherine. I folded the letter carefully, put it back in the envelope, sat there as the sun set and the room grew dark. $340 million. I thought about my apartment, the wobbling table, the second-hand couch, 15 years of just existing, not living, 15 years of telling myself I was fine, that I didn't need anything, that I'd made my peace with it all. I thought about Catherine at 23, sitting in that classroom, taking notes with fierce concentration. Catherine at 25, laughing in our tiny apartment. Catherine at 35, building her empire. Catherine in that police car, terrified and small. I thought about Christopher, storming out of this room. My son who'd spent half his life hating me for something I didn't do, who'd built his own success, his own life without me, who'd looked at me today with such cold fury. And I thought about Marcus Williams, the young man who'd been hit that night, 23 years old, his whole life ahead of him. I'd read about him over the years, kept track through old news articles. He'd survived, but with permanent injuries. Catherine's settlement had helped, but it hadn't given him back what he'd lost. I stood up slowly, pocketed the letter, and walked out of that conference room. The next week was a blur of meetings with lawyers, financial advisors, and accountants. The estate was complex. Properties all over Miami-Dade County. Investment portfolios. Business holdings. It would take months to fully transfer and organize everything. I moved through it all in a daze, signed papers, made decisions, set up accounts. The numbers were so large they didn't feel real. $340 million, more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. The first thing I did was call Marcus Williams. It took some work to find him. He'd moved several times since the accident, stayed out of the public eye. Finally, through a series of calls and a private investigator, I got a phone number. He answered on the third ring. Hello? Mr. Williams. My name is Richard Morrison. I was married to Catherine Morrison. I'm calling about the accident in 2009. There was a long silence. Okay, he said carefully. I wanted to meet with you. If you're willing, there are some things I need to tell you, and some things I need to do. We met at a coffee shop in Coconut Grove. Marcus was 40 now, but he moved like someone much older. A cane, a slight limp. The injuries from that night still visible in the way he carried himself. I told him everything. The truth about that night. Catherine's confession. The will. He listened quietly, his expression unreadable. When I finished, he was quiet for a long time. I knew something was off, he said finally. The settlement came too fast, too generous. Your confession had holes in it. But I was young, I was hurt, and the money helped. I didn't ask too many questions. I'm sorry, I said. I'm sorry for what happened to you. I'm sorry for the lie. I'm sorry you didn't get justice. You went to prison for 3 years. For something I didn't do. Yeah. He took a sip of his coffee. That's its own kind of injustice. I pulled out a folder I'd brought. Legal documents my lawyers had prepared. Catherine left instructions to continue your care. I'm setting up a trust in your name. $20 million. Managed by financial advisors. It'll generate enough income that you'll never have to worry about money again. Your medical care, your living expenses, anything you need. And if there's anything else, education, starting a business, helping your family, the fund will cover it. Marcus stared at the documents. I don't need your guilt money. It's not guilt money. It's what should have happened 15 years ago. It's justice, delayed but not denied. Please, let me do this one thing right. He was quiet for a long time. Then he took the folder. Okay, he said. Thank you. We shook hands. He left. I sat in that coffee shop for another hour, feeling lighter than I had in 15 years. Over the next few months, I set up a foundation, the Catherine Morrison Memorial Fund. Its mission, to provide legal defense and support for people who'd been wrongfully convicted or who'd taken the fall for others, to help them rebuild their lives after release, job training, housing assistance, educational scholarships, legal aid. I hired good people to run it, set aside $100 million to fund it in perpetuity. It was what Catherine would have wanted, I thought, a legacy of redemption. I kept some of the money. Not much by the standards of what I'd inherited, but more than I'd ever imagined having. I bought a small house near the beach. Nothing extravagant. 3 bedrooms, a yard, a garage where I could set up a drafting table. I started designing again, not for clients, just for myself. Buildings that existed only on paper, dreams in blueprint form. I traveled, took a train across the country, spent a month in Italy looking at architecture, went to Japan and stood in buildings that felt like prayers made of concrete and light. I lived, but there was still one thing unresolved. Christopher didn't call, didn't respond to my messages. I tried reaching out through Sarah Chen, through mutual acquaintances, through letters sent to his office. Nothing. 6 months after Catherine's death, I was sitting on my small patio, watching the sunset, when I heard a car pull into the driveway. I looked up. Christopher stood at the edge of my yard, hands in his pockets. He looked tired, older than he had at the will reading. "Can we talk?" he said. I nodded, gestured to the other chair on the patio. He sat down slowly, like it hurt. We sat in silence for a while, watching the sun paint the sky. "I hired investigators," he said finally. "Looked into that night, found the police reports, the inconsistencies. Talked to some of the officers who worked the case, the ones who are retired now. They told me they'd been pressured to accept your confession, that things hadn't added up. I waited. I also found out about the settlement, the amount Mom paid Marcus Williams, the timeline. It all fits with what she said." More silence. "I've been angry at you for 23 years, since I was 15. You were my hero when I was a kid, and then suddenly you were this person who destroyed everything. Mom never said anything bad about you, but she didn't have to. I filled in the blanks myself. Decided you were weak, selfish, a failure." His voice cracked on the last word. "I built my whole life trying to be nothing like you. Worked harder, made more money, never drank, never took risks, never let myself be vulnerable. And it turns out I was trying not to be someone who never existed. Christopher, I don't know how to process this. I don't know how to reconcile the father I thought I had with the father I actually have. I don't know how to be angry at Mom when she's dead. I don't know how to apologize for 23 years of treating you like garbage when you were the one who sacrificed everything." He was crying. My son, who I'd barely spoken to in 15 years, was sitting on my patio crying. I reached over and put my hand on his shoulder. He didn't pull away. "You don't have to apologize. You didn't know." "I should have known. I should have questioned it. Should have tried to understand. You were a kid, and then you were a young man building his life. You did what you needed to do. I was an asshole." "Yeah," I said. "You were. But you're here now." We sat there as the sun finished setting. When it was dark, Christopher stood up. "Can I come back? Tomorrow? Or next week? Whenever? I'd like to get to know you. The real you. I'd like that." He nodded, started to leave, then turned back. "The foundation you set up, the one in Mom's name. I'd like to help with it. If that's okay, I'm good at legal stuff. Raising money. I could be useful. I think your mother would have loved that." He smiled. Small, sad, but real. "Yeah, I think she would have." He left. I sat on the patio until late into the night, feeling something I hadn't felt in 15 years. Hope. Christopher started coming over once a week, then twice. We'd have dinner, talk about his work, about my designs, about Catherine. Slowly, carefully, we rebuilt what had been broken. It wasn't easy. There were arguments, misunderstandings, moments where the weight of the past felt too heavy. But we kept trying. He got involved with the foundation, used his connections to raise additional funds, helped shape the legal aid program, brought his intensity and drive to the mission. Catherine's son, through and through, but with something new, a willingness to admit mistakes, to grow. A year after Catherine's death, we held the first annual Catherine Morrison Memorial Fund Gala. Big event. Donors, politicians, people who'd been helped by the fund. Christopher gave a speech about redemption and second chances, about how we're all more than the worst thing we've ever done. I watched from the back of the room, thinking about Catherine, about the girl in the classroom, the woman who'd built an empire, the wife who'd made a terrible mistake and spent 15 years trying to atone. After the gala, Christopher and I stood outside the venue, watching people leave. Mom would have been proud, he said. Yeah, she would have. I miss her. Me too. Even after everything, I thought about it. The lie, the lost years, the pain. But also the young woman in the classroom, the laughter in our tiny apartment, the way she'd looked at Christopher the day he was born, like he was the most precious thing in the world. Yeah, I said, even after everything. We stood there in the Miami night, my son and I, carrying Catherine's legacy forward. It wasn't the life any of us had planned. It wasn't the ending any of us had expected. But it was redemption, of a sort. For Catherine, for Christopher, for me. And in the end, maybe that was enough. The years have passed since then. I'm 69 now. Christopher is 43. He got married last year. His wife is kind, smart, reminds me a little of his mother in the best ways. They're talking about having kids. I think about what kind of grandfather I'll be. Better than the father I got to be, I hope. Present, involved, honest. The foundation has helped over 2,000 people wrongfully convicted or caught in the justice system through no fault of their own. We've overturned 18 convictions, helped hundreds more rebuild their lives. I still design buildings. One of my designs is actually being built now, a community center in Liberty City, funded by the foundation. It'll have classrooms, job training facilities, a legal aid clinic, a building that helps people. That's all I ever wanted to do. I think about Catherine often. Wonder what she'd think of all this. Wonder if she'd be proud or angry or sad. Probably all three. I never remarried, never even dated. Some people thought that was sad, but it didn't feel that way to me. I'd had my great love. She was flawed and human and made terrible choices, but she was mine, and I was hers, and that was enough for one lifetime. Sometimes, late at night, I pull out that last letter she wrote me. Read it again. Live, Richard. Please. For both of us. I did, Catherine. I am. And maybe that's the real ending to this story. Not about money or wills or revenge or justice. Just about a man who loved a woman, who made a sacrifice, who lost everything, who found a way to live again. About a son who learned the truth and chose forgiveness. About a woman who made a terrible mistake and spent her last breath trying to make it right.